right, welcome everybody to Tuesday night with the County Executive, and I am Anne Arundel County Executive Stuart Pittman, and I am here with our esteemed police chief, Chief Amal Awad, and her team, and we're here to talk about body-worn cameras, the new program that that we are in the process of implementing in Anne Arundel County. But before I get started, one housekeeping item. If you would like to listen to the Spanish translation of this, you are, and you're logged into the Zoom webinar, you can click the interpretation icon that is part of the Zoom controls. So go into your Zoom controls and select Spanish. And if you would like to see the closed caption text of what we're saying and cannot, you can, in those controls, hit the CC button for closed caption. And you can read the text of what we're saying. So I'm kind of excited about this. This is not the first time that this team has done this presentation. They've been doing it to community groups around the county for the last couple of weeks. And this is, I think, the first time that we've opened it up to everybody who's interested in listening. And I just, for a little bit of background, I want to go back in history to, I guess, my first budget when I was first elected. And I said that I would like our officers to be wearing body-worn cameras. And I explored the concept with a number of people, got cost estimates, and decided in that budget we just couldn't pull it off that first year. Came back the second year, had some conversations with some council members and others, and there was some interest. It was lukewarm. I think a little lukewarm, maybe, depending on which officer you ask. Some would say that this would be a great thing to increase transparency, to make every encounter between police and community something that's on the public record, and people could find out about the good work that our officers are doing, and then if there was a suggestion that something wasn't done right, that we would have the evidence there. And our state's attorney and the folks in our courts also talked to us about the value of the camera footage from body-worn cameras in their work in the courthouse. So fast forward again, and this was I think just a little over a year ago that the youth chapter of the NAACP of Anne Arundel County got the word out that there was a possibility of doing this. And I got 330 some emails, as did everybody on the council, from young people. And they were just people mostly in our Anne Arundel County schools who had been contacted. And every one of those letters was individually written. And they talked about reasons why they thought that a program like this would be good for the county. And we emailed all of them about tonight. I hope many of you are here, because I want those youth to see the work that's been done as a result of their work. So I really want to credit the young people of this county for thinking proactively about the future and encouraging us to do this. You all convinced the council that we could, in fact, afford to do this in our budget. So that put the police department, gave them a large task to undertake, to figure out what was the best technology to use, what kind of protocols needed to be in place, what kind of training would be needed for officers to adapt to having body-worn cameras, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So I am going to turn it over to our chief, and we'll hear a few words from her, and then she will be turning it over to the experts who've been working on this. And then we want to hear from you as well, your thoughts about implementation, about how you think that this should work, and what you think of it. So, Chief Awad.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you, Mr. Pittman. My name is Amal Awad. I serve as your Chief of Police. I thank you all for joining us, and more importantly, thank you all for supporting this investment in the department and the community. To Mr. Pittman, our county council, and all of you throughout Anne Arundel County, we truly thank you for your support. This has been a project that, again, originated last year after the murder of George Floyd. And in that moment, it catapulted our nation into action. And here we are today. Much of what you've heard from Mr. Pittman, we're near implementation. So Today, we have the opportunity to both enhance transparency and increase accountability, reinforcing the relationships and the trust that we've established throughout the years within this county. I'd also like to thank our dedicated team of professionals from within the police department and the Office of Information Technology, most of whom you'll meet and hear from tonight momentarily. But these folks have worked tirelessly and diligently to bring this project to fruition. So these are our subject matter experts. We rely on them heavily, and we look forward to engaging with everyone this evening. So Mr. Derek Matthews will walk us through tonight's presentation. And without any further delay, I introduce you to Mr. Derek Matthews. Derek, are you there? There he is.
All right, I am back. I'm on a hot spot now, so hopefully I should be okay. The weather knocked us out down here down south. Are we ready? Am I up?
We're ready. Yeah, you're up. I got knocked out briefly too. We must not live far from each other, Derek.
I'm on a hot spot now. We kind of prepared for this. So good evening, everyone. I hope this doesn't cause me to talk fast, but I want to get us through this with this impending storm beating on. So I'm going to be your moderator for the next hour or so. That being said, I'm going to walk you through a series of slides. I'm going to turn it over a few times to my colleagues for some technical things and some policy questions. As the county executive did in the intro, we've done this quite a few times. So we even have some questions that I'll try to insert in between that came in today from Facebook. We really appreciate that. But here's how I want it to work if we can. My associates will be monitoring the hand raising portion of Zoom, which will allow us to see when you have a question. We'll try to monitor that as best we can. I will call on you basically in groups of 3, meaning that I may say, okay, I have Mr. Matthews in queue, I have Mr. Johnson in queue, and I have Mr. Smith in queue. I'll say, Mr. Matthews, you're up first, and then I'll say, Mr. Johnson, you're up next. What I'm going to ask is when you begin to speak, just before you begin to speak, unmute yourself. And the big thing for an issue of time and respect for others, try to keep your question, 1, pertain to specifically tonight, the body cameras, but 2, try to keep your question in the form of a question so we can try to pinpoint which one of us needs to give attention to it. So without further ado, I have Ms. Deborah Judy start us off and bring up the slide deck, and we'll begin.
Did you want to introduce Derek? I know you popped on late.
Okay, so I have with me tonight Captain Hassanpush, who is the overall commander of the Body Worn Camera Project program. I have Deborah Judy, who's been our program manager and keeps everything running smoothly. I have Mr. Lee Reyes from Axon. Axon is the company that we've contracted with that also has our tasers, and he will provide technical advice. I have Major Ross Passman on the line, who will be very specific when it's time to ask questions as well. And of course, we have our astute Commander-in-Chief, our police chief, Chief Awad. Did I miss anybody, Deborah, while I was off?
Jose Miranda.
Jose Miranda. Jose Miranda will be assisting us with the translation as we leave this call and continue to spread the information throughout the community. He's been very instrumental in trying to translate a lot of the things that we put on social media and some of the slide presentations. He will continue to do that, a great asset for that. We thank him for being on board. Okay. All right, I'm ready, Deb. All right, so as we've got our brief introduction, we'll dive right into this. So the body worn camera, I'm going to talk a little bit about the components and kind of talk about where we started. As we said, the contract was initiated and awarded back in July of 2020. So just coming up on about a year that we've been formally and officially engaged in this process. We've got a total of 1,680 cameras that we've contracted. Mathematically meaning we have 2 cameras will be assigned to each officer. So every officer on the Anne Arundel County Police Department, from the chief down, all sworn personnel, will be issued a piece of equipment ×2. They will have one that they'll wear on their person while on duty, as well as any supplemental duty, that's their part-time jobs. And they'll have one that'll be in queue that will be charging, et cetera, or should we have technical issues, they can switch out. There's 8 bay charging docks for a total of 117. As I move about the county, we'll show you some pictures. All of our district stations now are equipped. We have single bay charging docks, a total of 39. And then we have our in-car signal units. The in-car signal units, we'll talk a little bit about the technology and how they transmit the signal. You'll see a picture on the bottom left. If you were to go into any district station, as well as headquarters or any facility that we operate in and out of operational, you'll see these charging docks and these mounts on the wall. This is where the officers remove the body camera from their shirts, right here, kind of where I'm pointing, and they will insert that into those charging docks. We'll talk a little bit more about that technologically in a second. Go ahead, Deb. So I just want to walk you through the timeline to kind of give you a snapshot of what's transpired and where we are and where we're headed. So the contract initiation again goes back to July 2020. In that process, we've had now the build out of the infrastructure. We've had facility modifications. So facility modifications meaning that when we put those docking stations in, we utilize the state-of-the-art wiring technology, power sources, to get those installations done. Then of course we had to hire the program resources. So I believe we have one more hire left in queue that we'll bring on after all the backgrounding and all the HR stuff is done, and that will complete our team of the resources to keep the program up and running. Every vehicle needed to be modified. The vehicles had to be modified to make sure that when the 360s were activated, that in fact the camera comes on and all of that technologically stuff works in unison. And we'll talk again more about technology. And then we have the application and the configuration. This is how we make everything kind of mesh and work together. So between September to about now where we are in May, we're going into June and we're going to start testing the application. We're going to utilize our state-of-the-art training academy. We're going to bring our first group of officers down to the academy and do what we call super trainers. We'll make sure that that first group of test officers that go through the training are qualified to help us train the rest of the officers. So by sometime around July, we'll be hot and heavy with the training of the officers to get that completed fully by October 2021, this year, October. Every officer on the Anne Arundel County Police Department will have gone through that training. Deborah. All right, so I'm going to talk about the purpose and kind of why we're here. The county executive hit in his opening some of the things that he talked about coming into office that we're now bringing to fruition. First and foremost, our ability to strengthen our police accountability. You can't turn the television on right now or listen to anything on the radio and not hear the desire for police to be accountable. We're looking for this body camera program to strengthen our ability to remain accountable for what it is we do in the public. We also want to make sure that we promote the de-escalation of both law enforcement as well as the people that we encounter every day as we move about and serve the community. And of course, we want to enhance the ability to resolve any officer-involved incidents as well as complaints. So the body camera works two-way. It's a two-way street. It holds us accountable, and we're hoping that historically, as we looked at best practices around the country, that the body cameras also allow us the ability to enhance and resolve officers getting complaints. And then, of course, one of the big things that we like to really highlight here is the ability to improve our transparency. We'll talk about the technology and how the cameras and when they're utilized, et cetera. But this will force us to remain and give us the ability to continue to be as transparent as we want to be. Identify and correct any internal agency training and policy and other issues. So as we know in law enforcement, it's always an evolution of change. Crime change, how crimes are committed change, the perpetrators change, they get smarter. Well, as law enforcement, we have to make sure that we have the ability to do the same thing. So by going back and looking at incidents and looking at footage and learning from this process, we already are under the understanding, and we know that at some point it's going to force us to look at how we do business and force us to maybe navigate certain other directions as we're moving forward in some of our training. I want to highlight here, because this is something new that we haven't said in the previous. We just graduated a police training academy, and they were in the academy longer than any other academy. And that was because extra things were added because we've had to change how we train police officers. So that's a great example of how we do this. And then, of course, it's strengthening officer performance and safety and increasing community safety. So by bringing this technology to bear, it's going to strengthen the ability of the officers to be safe, as well as the community in which we serve. This is where I'm going to make my first handoff. I'm going to turn it over to Lee from Axon. And Lee is going to walk us through some of the limitations of the cameras from a technological standpoint, and then he'll kick it back to me. Lee?
Evening, everyone. My name is Lee Reese. I'm one of the strategic project managers for Axon. I thank you guys very much for having me on this evening to join in this conversation. A couple of the things that we want to discuss tonight about the body camera itself. It is a point of view style recording system that's going to capture both video and audio, keeping in mind that it's mounted on the uniform of the officer, usually in the center of the chest, facing forward. So this does bring in some considerations to look at as you're looking at the camera and looking at the video that it produces. It's not necessarily going to capture everything involved in the incident, because there are going to be times where the camera is pointed in one direction and the officer is pointed potentially in another direction, or is focused on another area. It still potentially grabs audio, and it's still going to grab video of the surroundings, but it may not grab exactly what the officer is seeing at that time because of the placement on the uniform. The camera also does not capture or record any physiological or biometric data related to the officer. So it's not grabbing respiration, it's not grabbing heart rate or blood pressure or anything along those lines to understand any sort of psychological or physiological stress that the officer may be encountering. And at the same time, it also does not capture any of that for the community members that the officer is encountering at that time either. So keeping in mind that the camera is not capturing any additional data other than just the video and audio recording. The camera also does not determine the officers or the person that they're speaking with or dealing with at the time, does not manage their state of mind or does not capture their state of mind. You'll see actions, you'll hear comments made, but you won't necessarily understand the exact thought process that the officer is going through, nor the individual that they're speaking with at that present time. And the audio and video alone don't necessarily provide the full situational awareness of the officer and the perception of what's taking place around them at the time of the incident. It's important to remember that, again, it is a video and audio capture of a 3D environment. And it doesn't necessarily show or bring into consideration all of the pieces of information that the officer has at their disposal, and then the information that they're basing their decisions on at the time. So a couple of things that we want to talk about with the actual camera itself and the technology associated with this camera. There are going to be triggering mechanisms. The officer is fully capable of initiating a recording on their own, just manually starting that recording. However, there are 3 other additional triggers that can potentially be utilized by the officer to begin the recording process. The first one is going to be the in-car signal device, which was noted and pictured on the very first slide that we saw, indicating the types of equipment that were put into the field. This is actually placed in the patrol vehicle. Based on an activation of the lights inside of the patrol vehicle, the camera will start recording as a result of that triggering mechanism. And it's similar to a Bluetooth signal that goes out and tells the camera to begin recording. The taser can also initiate this recording as well, and it's the taser being armed and utilized in the field. And ultimately, another option is the holster itself. So if a weapon is drawn from the holster with the weapon being pulled out can cause the camera to start recording as well. All 3 of these are obviously extra options for starting the recording. As like I mentioned before, the officer does have the capability to initiate the recording right at the beginning of the encounter based off of an individual decision. A couple of the specifications that the camera has. The camera itself, once turned on, it's going to capture a 60-second window prior to the incident. The idea behind this is the camera is always capturing information. And when that camera starts recording, it's going to pull the previous 60 seconds worth of information in video format to bring in information associated with that encounter. The camera itself holds about 26 hours worth of video. And then at some point, once that camera is either full or at a given time frame per agency policy, the camera can be uploaded. Battery life of the camera is going to be roughly 12 to 13 hours, giving the officer the ability to run the camera and utilize the camera during the course of their entire shift. And it does record at a 720 resolution. There are a couple other capabilities. And Derek, I do want to ask, would you like me to go into these, or would you like for the captain to cover these as well?
Let's go ahead and have you go ahead. You've got the mic. Let's have you go ahead and continue with the technology.
Sounds good, sir. So the camera does have the capability to live stream. The camera has an embedded LTE SIM card, similar to how your cell phone operates. And based on that ability and that technology, the camera can provide a live stream, both audio and video, back to recipients who have authorization and permission to access that stream. This is not something that can be done by just everybody in the system. It is only given to people that have a permission to actually access that stream. This allows for real-time acquisition and access to the video directly from what the officer is encountering, so it can be seen in real time by a supervisor or someone of that the standing to have access to that information. Video retention, just to keep in mind that videos will be retained for a specific amount of time, and I think the captain will speak specifically to some of those details. But the camera records the video once it's uploaded based on the video retentions per police policy. The policy will allow for the videos to be retained for a specific amount of time, and then ultimately evidence.com, the system will purge those videos out as needed. And one of the most important aspects of the system in its totality is the fact that the original video can never be altered. Redactions can take place, clips can take place, and other things like that can be managed inside of evidence.com. However, the video itself in the original format can never be altered. So there will always be the original copy captured inside of the system.
Great job. Before I turn it over to the captain, Lee, let me keep you right here for a second. So
yes, sir.
You talked about the 3 triggering devices. Can you just give us a little bit about if I'm on scene and I'm actively engaged, and then you pull up in your camera, but let's say for some reason mine wasn't on or yours wasn't on. Can we talk about that trigger and us being able to capture?
Absolutely, sir. So if I'm engaged in an incident where I've activated the blue lights or the emergency equipment in my patrol vehicle, and my supporting officer, Derek, shows up to help out as a backup officer or cover officer, and during the course of the time frame that I have triggered the lights inside of my vehicle, if Derek arrives within 30 seconds of that triggering mechanism and he gets to within 30 feet of the patrol vehicle, his camera will automatically start recording based on the fact that my signal inside my vehicle has asked his camera or told his camera to begin recording. The same holds true for both the taser and the holster. If we're out on scene and I draw my weapon and Derek is my cover officer, he hasn't drawn his weapon, I've drawn mine and he's within 30 feet of me and he's within the 30-second window. So obviously he would be nearby to me. And I draw my weapon, his camera will also start recording to ensure that we have multiple points of view of the incident that happened as a result of me drawing my weapon. And the same holds true for the taser. So it gives a window of opportunity for the cameras to start recording to capture multiple points of view.
Okay. All right. I'm going to bring Captain H in now and add him to this slide. Captain, let's talk a little bit too about the fact that the cameras are always on, but are not necessarily always recording. And then we'll take it from there.
Thanks, Derek. Thanks, Lee. Yes, as Lee mentioned, the cameras are always on and they're always recording, but they're only saving the last 60 seconds of what's called the buffering video, so that when the camera is activated to record, it does grab that 60 seconds of video prior to the audio and video recording starting, so that it can provide some context of what led up to the moment that recording was started manually by the officer, either by policy or by one of the signal devices where the camera was activated automatically.
Okay. So Captain, can we stay right there for a second? I've got one housekeeping. So I know I'm a little guilty. I'm going to slow down my speech a little bit for the folks interpreting for us. So I'm going to ask that we all be mindful of that. And secondly, while we're here, Captain, I've got a question here in queue about the redaction and the what is the county public record and redaction policy that's been significant for use in other jurisdictions. So I guess they're talking about when it is that we're gonna possibly blur out faces of witnesses and what have you.
It's hard to get into a hypothetical scenario, but in general, the body-worn camera recordings are considered records and evidence, just like any other record or evidence that the police department maintains. So the release of video will be following the Maryland Public Information Act, and then also following the guidelines of the Maryland Court Rules of Evidence. And then there are provisions in our policy that provides for the police chief to authorize the release of videos after consulting with prosecutors or any other legal entity that might be involved in a situation. We certainly don't want to prematurely release a video that may cause damage to a prosecution or cause some undue effect that we don't intend. By the same token, we want to be transparent and we want to be able to share video when needed. One other concern that came up with some of the stakeholder groups that we talked to was some groups would like to, are interested in the video that's being released. There's other people in the community that are concerned about their privacy. So for example, if there was somebody that's not involved in an incident, but got captured by the video and audio recording, those are the kind of things that we would redact either by blurring a face or taking out audio. We want to protect people's privacy. We want to protect, if there's a youth or juvenile involvement, we certainly want to protect certain identities, and all those kind of line up with the existing laws and regulations that surround that kind of thing. So that's hopefully that answered the question.
Yes, sir. Captain, let me keep you right there, and then I'm going to move on to the next slide. I did get a question come in earlier from Facebook that's right there where we are. And it says, will there be any consideration given to 911 call related to someone dealing with emotional challenges? So I guess with respect to our CIT folks, as well as other folks who may respond, we can talk about that 60-second loop or when it is that we turn them on and off for privacy. If we can keep you right there, that'd be great.
Yeah, Derek, I'm sorry, there was like a gap in the middle of your question, and I don't think I got the full context of it.
Okay, so will there be any consideration given to social workers, therapists who work with law enforcement on a 911 call when they're dealing with people with emotional challenges?
There's always a consideration for that. And then if related directly to body-worn cameras, we do have a policy where if a clinician is interacting with a person in a somewhat patient-clinician relationship, Our policy requires that video be turned off to protect that kind of privacy. We also have in policy where our officers have discretion to turn off their video cameras while they're in environments where other medical interventions are taking place, like in an emergency room or the back of a ambulance, just to protect HIPAA and people's personal health information and treatment. Those kind of things. We want to be very careful of that, but we still want to capture the video as much as we can on the overall incident. But there are considerations for turning off video in sensitive situations, such as that, certain domestic violence interactions we have with domestic violence victims and sexual assault victims. Those are considerations that are taken when a decision is made by the officer to turn off the video.
Okay. I got a couple more, but I'm going to move into the next slide and I'll insert those in. I want to make sure that we're good on time. Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Captain. All right. So we did a press release on March 31st, actually doing a full-fledged announcement that the body-worn camera webpage, we actually created a specific webpage on our police webpage that actually outlines the program. We've also provided frequently asked questions. The link is going to be right here in our chat box. We'll put that up periodically for you to be able to see the link. Once we get off of this slide, we'll make sure that we pop it up a few more times. So we're taking all the questions that are coming in and we're kind of categorizing them like the ones we got today, and we're putting those into the frequently asked questions, also known as the FAQs. And then we put a button on the link that allows public feedback, where you can actually click that link and kind of give us feedback after you've reviewed whatever it is you've seen. If you want to provide comments, you have the ability to do that. As the county executive said in his introduction, we've done quite a few stakeholder gatherings where we've met with some of the larger organizations throughout the county. We've done a setting just like this as well with our county council. And to kind of give you an example about change, we did a briefing one morning and we went into that. And as Axon said, we have a 60-second delay. Earlier that day, before session let out, we had a 30-second delay. But because of some new laws with the Police Officer Bill of Rights or what have you, we had to change that. And we did it right in conjunction with standing the program up. We changed that from 30 seconds to 60 seconds to make sure that we were, in fact, keeping up to the standards as they were changing. We're actually doing our county executive virtual town hall as promised, according to our timeline today. And then on that website, Deb, I know I kind of threw you off a little bit, but I want to go back and we'll click it, but I just wanted to walk through this first. We'll make sure that we'll do press releases at least once a month at a minimum, just to keep you and anyone else that's not on this particular forum updated. So we're going to click the link real quick, the hyperlink, just to kind of give you an idea of what you'll see when you click that link. So you'll be on the police department page and you'll see the body-worn camera down on the bottom left. And you'll see the program status, just as I said. You'll see the policy. You'll see the frequently asked questions. You'll be able to keep track of the press releases. And then thanks to our partners, like Corporal Miranda on the phone and others, those will be put into Spanish as well. But you can see that we put a lot of time and energy into trying to make sure that our transparency also works in conjunction with you being able to, as the public, navigate through what it is we're trying to accomplish here. Okay. So I'm going to kind of dive into some of these questions again. So here, just kind of giving you a quick snapshot This is our press information officer, Sergeant Cam Cook. He's actually in a district station, actually showing us how you remove the camera from your lapel, from your shirt, place it into that docking station, and that's what sends the data up to evidence.com. Just a simple picture of one of our district stations as he's doing that. Okay, so I'm going to take a second. I'm going to run through some of the questions that I see. Have you touched base with the community to ask if they think mental health experts are being used as often as they should be? This is from Emma Buckman. Captain, you wanna touch that one? Have we touched base with any of the community to ask if they think mental health experts are being used as often as they should be?
We always try to keep in touch with our community and address issues as they come up and answer questions and try to understand what the needs in the community are. I don't know that we've specifically asked that specific question, but I would like to share that we've been, the police department has been fully integrated with the Anne Arundel County Crisis Response System, which is the mental health agency of the county, since about 2014. Our crisis intervention team unit, which is comprised of sworn police officers, teams up and works with 81 crisis response clinicians. The officers are partnered with them throughout the system. They help and work together at the call center where calls are come in. People may know that in the community as the warm line. They work with our mobile crisis teams in the field. The mobile crisis teams which are clinicians are on our radio system, so they can be dispatched to calls in real time. They also work in hospital diversion programs. When people show up suffering from opioid overdoses, we try to get to them right away to see if we can offer them services. Same thing with people that find themselves in the emergency room for emergency petitions because there's been some indication that they're a danger to themselves or somebody else. We try to get the mobile crisis team and our crisis intervention team linked up with them so that we can provide continuing support so that we do not end up having to contact them in a law enforcement interaction in the future. We work with the detention center to divert people going into jail in the first place, and when they come out to have a successful transition. We've worked with a program called Safe Stations, where it's a kind of no fault when you're ready to come in to get treatment for opioid addiction. We in the fire department are ready to help you. And just note that our crisis intervention team has received several awards and recognized. We're recognized in the region as one of the leaders. We find a lot of other police departments come to us and ask a lot of questions because they like to do the same thing we do. Our CIT unit was named 2020 CIT Unit of the Year by CIT International, which is a very recognized, we really appreciate being recognized by that. And it is really a good message for the community that we do try to lean forward on these issues, and we would rather help people than have to interact with them in a law enforcement manner through enforcement.
Okay. Thank you, Captain.
Yeah,
So
can I add something? Can I add
yes,
something
sir.
on that
Yes,
point?
sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
The demands on our mental health warm line have gone up, and our crisis teams, the demands have gone up during the pandemic. More overdoses as well, and I think more domestic violence, that sort of crime during the pandemic. So we did sort of create a model in this county for the rest of the state on these crisis intervention teams, merging with the mental health agency. And so if you want more of that stuff, make sure that you let the county council know that the 4 new positions of officers and the 6.5 new positions of counselors in the mental health agency that we put into this budget are worth funding. It's important work, in my view.
Thank you, sir. So I have Shannon O'Connell has their hand up. And it looks like the question is, Captain, I think I'm going to feed you this one. Is it legal for citizens to have their own dashboard cameras on during police interaction or traffic incident? And I guess Is it legal for citizens to have their own dashboard camera on during police interaction or a traffic incident?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we don't mind being recorded. It's there's no law against recording the activities of a police officer in a public place, doing public things. Just when we are having an interaction with a law enforcement officer, we would prefer cooperation. And if the officer asks you for identification from a lawful traffic stop, your driver's license, all the things that they're legally able to ask you for, that you comply with that. But if you have a camera going, if you have the cell phone going, you have some other camera system in your car, that's fine and perfectly legal to do.
Okay. All right. Shannon O'Connell, let me make sure I answered the question. Would you like to ask anything additional? Unmute yourself.
How do I do that?
You're good. We can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you for answering that question. That was actually, I have a soon-to-be new driver, and they're concerned about what they're seeing and hearing in the news, and that was actually a question that they had. And then the other question that I'm glad you asked me, so it took a long time to type in, but I was always taught that we live way down in South County, so there's not a lot, there's a long stretch that there isn't a lot of lights. So when an officer goes to pull you over and you're in an unlit area and you don't think that there's a reason why you should be pulled over, or you're alone, or just whatever reason, to slow down, turn your warning lights on, and to pull over as soon as you possibly can. Is that still the best course of action? I think there's just some concern after the video that was shown what happened in Richmond.
Captain.
Yes, we know that there are police impersonators out there, and that's a concern. There's not a lot of them, but that is certainly a concern. And if you're concerned about that and you are on a dark and windy road may not be the best place to stop, because it may be dangerous anyway. And a good police officer may choose to stop you down the road, which is why sometimes you may notice that the police officer is behind you, but they may just be waiting for a safe place to stop you. But if you are concerned, by all means, as long as it doesn't look like you're trying to flee or you're trying to evade, or anything like that, it is a good tip, I suppose, to put on your hazard lights if it is at nighttime. If you turn on your interior lights of your car so the officer can see what's going on inside the car when they approach the car. Those are all good things. Those are tips that I've given my own kids when they learned how to drive. They're still young, so I constantly remind them, to be respectful. Don't be digging around for anything. Just follow the instructions of the officer when they talk to you and ask you for things. You can also, if you have the opportunity to dial 911 just to let the dispatcher know what you're doing. If you can do that safely without distracting you from driving on the roadway, you could also do that too, and just tell the call taker that, hey, the officer's trying to stop me. I'm a little concerned that we're in a dangerous place. I'm not trying to flee. Here's where I'm at. I'm going to stop at the first place. I think those are all good tips. Like I said, I tell my own children that. So those are good things to do, and be respectful and answer questions. And if it is a police officer making a lawful stop, they can ask you for your driver's license, your registration card, and your insurance information, and just go along with what's going on. But certainly what you talked about are reasonable things, and we understand that.
Okay, I appreciate you answering the questions. We just have new drivers at home, and it just, some uncertainty of what's going on. And just appreciate you having this forum tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connell. Thank you for participating. Okay, Major Passman, I think I'm going to direct the next question to you, sir. John Gorfalo is back again asking, his question is, and I'll read it slow. I don't see the redaction policy or standard on the website. What aspects of video will be redacted and how privacy will be specifically addressed? Will we be releasing that? Will we release that soon? Major Passman, muted. Okay, Captain, you want to? There
Can you hear me now there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. I think Captain Hossabush kind of talked about that earlier.
Yes.
It's going to be dependent on the situation. Again, juveniles, things will be redacted. Certain innocent parties that might be captured. Any type of domestic violence intervention, questioning regarding that. Sexual assault intervention, those types of things. We talked about mobile crisis and their clinical interventions. Those type of things will be handled on a case-by-case basis by the staff that have been hired to do those type of redactions.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay. And I know on some of the other calls, we talked about our SROs in schools dealing with witnesses and that type of stuff. Okay. All right, folks, let me remind everyone that's on the line, feel free to raise your hand and I will call on you as soon as I see your hand raised. I am not showing any hands raised, so I'm going to keep the conversation going and look over at the questions that came in from social media prior to the call. One of the questions I have here, Major, since you have the floor, will the officer be able to take this documentation from the camera to court with them, for example, during a DUI case? Will they be able to show footage from a DUI stop?
Yeah, so we're going to be sharing our video with the state's attorney's office for prosecution purposes. They have hired a staff to also look through our video and to find out what would be needed for court. But certainly, yes, that video will be available for court purposes and any type of legal purposes.
Okay. All right. And I think we'll tag team this one. This one may cross the span of a couple of you to answer. This one also came in prior to getting on the call, and I'll read it slow for our translators. What portion of the budget will be directed towards data collection, review, compliance, disciplinary actions, as opposed to cultural change in regards to training, retraining, and mental health supports? So I guess overall, we have a budget for the body-worn camera. They're asking, have we looked at breaking it down towards data collection, compliance/disciplinary, cultural change management, and training and retraining? Have we?
Well, I would say that some of those things are not in the body worn. We didn't list them as body worn camera expenses. Some of those are ongoing anyway, so they're in the police department budget. and I guess that the budget's not broken down in those categories, so it's really hard to say. Okay. Somebody would have to go through each item and add them up. But training in particular is a large budget item that for everything at the academy and the ongoing training. So we have to do some work to get an answer to that one, I think.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. County Executive. All right. I have two hands up. Looks like Michael J. Mattia. Forgive me. I hope I got that right. 2 minutes, and try to keep your question in the form of a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. And then Megan, you'll be up next.
Okay, my question is, one of our officers is stopped somewhere and a private citizen walks up and they say, look, I got some information on this guy 3 doors down from me. He's dealing drugs. He's got cars coming in there all times of the day or night. is that officer have that ability to turn that camera off. Because what we fear is that if a citizen comes in with a tip about a crime or something, and they're on that video, and that defense attorney, he's going to dig and dig and dig. He's going to want to know, where did you get this information from? If that goes back to that citizen that gave him that tip about what that guy was doing down there, all right, we know that there's going to be retaliation. All of a sudden, he's going to have his car damaged. He's going to have his house got broken windows. He's going to do anything. There's going to be witness intimidation involved there. We know that. You've seen it in the past. You know, it's been going on for years. That officer, if that information is given out the first time that something happens to that citizen because they turn that information in, you have lost the trust of every citizen in the county. Nobody's going to help the police do anything. We need to protect citizens when they come in with information about that. They need to be protected, absolutely 100%. Go ahead.
We agree, sir. I'm gonna let Captain Hassenbush address that one. Thank you.
Yeah, so a couple things there. As we mentioned before, the camera is not actually recording audio and video all the time. It's recording video and then kind of eating its own tail every 60 seconds until the officer activates the camera. Another part of that question is that the officers are required to notify people that they're around or interacting with that they are being recorded. So you would have some notification on that. And then if any voluntary interaction with an officer, the citizen or the community member that the officer is interacting with can request that the camera be turned off or that the recording not be started if that interaction is voluntary. So in the circumstances that you describe where, you know, you run into an officer at convenience store and say, "Officer, hey, can I talk to you for a second? You know, I have some information." Chances are that officer's not going to start his camera unless there's some indication that there's something else going on in the first place. But then you could also request that the officer not start his camera if that interaction is voluntary. If the interaction is an enforcement measure on the officer's part, such as a traffic stop, or if the officer is doing a reasonable suspicion stop on a person, that officer is required to continue that recording. But in the circumstances that you described, the officer has the discretion to not start the recording or turn the recording off at the community member's request, as long as the interaction between the community member and the officer is voluntary.
Thank you, Captain. Appreciate it. Okay, Megan Ranby is up next. Megan, unmute yourself and you have 2 minutes.
Hey there. Thank you for holding this town hall today. And I also want to say thank you to the team that's responding to comments online. I got a response today from mine, so I just want to say thank you for taking the time to do that. My question today is regarding the disciplinary process for officers who fail to follow the body-worn camera policy, both who do so like repeatedly or who fail to activate their camera in a critical incident. So I asked this question online, and the response I got was pointing me towards a written directive 303, which also points towards a written directive 401. Both documents make it clear that the chief of police has the final authority on disciplinary actions, and that only the chief of police is authorized to terminate an employee. So I have 2 questions to Chief Awad. The first is, will you commit to taking the progressive disciplinary actions per 303 for officers that repeatedly fail to follow the body-worn camera policy? And number 2, will you commit to terminating an employee that fails to activate their body-worn camera during an incident that results in the death or serious injury to a community member? Thank you.
So thank you for the question. Each incident will be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. And what we look at is whether an officer either intentionally or unintentionally does not activate their equipment. In cases where an officer intentionally does not do so, of course, we would refer those cases to be investigated. In the event of an unintentional activation, you have to consider that if there are other officers around, their equipment will activate that officer's equipment 9 times out of 10. But if it's not the case and the officer's alone and the officer gets out of the car and is immediately presented with a scenario, our policies state, that as soon as it's practical and safe, that the officer activate his or her equipment. So in the event that an officer unintentionally does not, will consider training or retraining to help the officers better understand. You have to understand this is all new technology and equipment for all of us, and there will certainly be a learning curve, especially in the earlier portions of the months to come. But, again, we'll evaluate on a case-by-case basis as to whether or not the acts are intentional or unintentional.
Thank you very much, Chief. We are just about at the top of the hour. I see no hands raised. I'm going to go over and get 1 or 2 more questions that were sent in earlier and keep us right on time. How will cameras, this question came in earlier, how often will cameras be checked and updated that are carried on the police? Captain Hassan-Bush, why don't you take that one?
Sure. Thank you. It's a good question. Our policy is going to be for the officers to rotate their camera out when they come in the morning. So you saw those pictures of the docking stations. Those docking stations serve to not only charge the camera's battery, but it also uploads the video that's on the camera to our digital evidence management system. And then it also downloads any firmware update or software update that comes from Axon. So that camera is always being updated every day when the officer, I've kind of termed it docks and swaps their camera. And that's how that'll happen. I think that answers that question.
Yes,
This was another
yes
question.
sir, I believe it did. Okay. I think everything else appears to be duplicative in asking about disciplinary action, budget, and transparency. So again, we are just about at the top of the hour. I'm going to, there's a couple of kudos that were given. I believe Megan says she sent in a question. Kudos to the team and kudos for her letting us know that we did a great job of answering that question in a timely fashion. That's an example of our intent here. So please keep those questions coming and we'll continue to do that. I'd like to thank my entire team for, again, us getting on and working in unison to explain this to the public. And Chief, at this time, I'm going to turn it back over to you for some closing remarks. And I think our work here is almost done. Chief?
So I just want to thank everyone who participated and asked questions. There were some very good questions here for all of our team. We're looking forward to the implementation of this program. It will be here sooner than not. And we're really excited about, deploying these cameras on all of us so that we do just what it's intended to do, which is to increase trust, our accountability, our transparency. I can't thank this team enough for all the work that they've done. Thank you all for every one of you who's worked so hard at bringing this program to fruition for us. Thank you for funding it and all the residents and folks who called in and asked for this program. So I think it'll help us as we move forward in the future. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. And we'll give the county executive, sir, you have the last word.
All right, thanks, Derek. I got a lot out of this. It's the first time I've seen the information in the slides, but it's great to hear it as a presentation and to hear the questions and the conversation. I have to say that in this job that I do, I get to hear from everybody. My job is to represent everybody. And you watch the news and you read the headlines and you think that there's some kind of war going on between communities and police. And generally, when you see something in the news, they're trying to make a story, and things get exaggerated. And what I've found in this county is that really people are pretty reasonable, and most people want the same thing. Everybody wants justice. Everybody wants fairness, and this program and some of the other things that are going on in our police department as well and throughout county government, I think are bringing people together rather than dividing them. And I'm proud of that, and I'm glad about that. And I always say that building trust is, whether it's trust with policing and law enforcement, or whether it's just trust in government in general, that government is yours and it's working for you, that it's the transparency and the community engagement that gets you there. And so it's hard work. There are always going to be people who want to divide us, but I think that we're making real progress, and we're all human beings, and we all want the same thing. So thank you, everybody, for participating in this. We got great police officers out there doing great work, and great advocates in the community that are doing great work to bring us all together. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. And to all, have a good evening. Thank you for joining us.